Farouk El-Baz. Interviewed by Rebecca Wright. Boston, Massachusetts, November 2, 2009. Wright, today is November 2, 2009. This oral history interview is being conducted with Dr. Farouk El-Baz in Boston, Massachusetts, for the Johnson Space Center Oral History Project. Interviewer is Rebecca Wright, assisted by Jennifer Rosnazal. We certainly would like to start by telling you thank you. We know you're a very busy person with a very busy schedule, so thank you for finding time for us today. El-Baz, you're welcome to come here, because this is part of the history of the United States. It's important that we all chip in. Right, we're glad to hear that. We know your work with NASA began as early as 1967 when you became employed by Belcom, Incorporated. Could you share with us how you learned about that opportunity and how you made that transition into becoming an employee there? El-Baz, just the backdrop, I finished my PhD here in the U.S. First job offer was from Germany. It was in June 1964. I was teaching there, at the University of Heidelberg, until December 1965. I went to Egypt then, tried to get a job in geology. I was unable for a whole year, so I came back to the U.S. as an immigrant in the end of 1966. For the first 3 months of 1967, I began to search for a job. When I arrived in the winter, most of the people that I knew were at universities, and most universities had hired the people that would teach during the year. I wasn't getting much response, so I tried to apply to mining companies, oil companies, or whatever I could get. Very little was happening. I had been getting all kinds of professional magazines. One of them was Physics Today. In this Physics Today there was just a 1/4-page ad advertisement for Belcom. It said, "We need geologists to work on the moon from photographs that have been taken by lunar orbiter missions." So I thought I would apply there too. My wife was the one typing all the letters of applications. I had sent by then, by end of February, something like 120 letters of application. I was sending them as fast as I could, so this would have been the 121st letter. That evening my wife was beginning to feel tired. It was like 11 o'clock. I told her, "Here is one more." She said, "What's this about?" "I'm tired now." I told her, "Well, send out one more." She said, "What's that about?" I said, "Well, they said that they need geologists to look at the moon." She said, "And what do you know about the moon?" I said, "Nothing, but I can learn." She grudgingly typed the letter. There were 2 typos. I did not ask her to redo anything. I corrected them myself neatly. We sent the letter, and that was the letter that I got the first response from. They said, "You'll come and interview, I think the 1st of March or something like that," so I went down for that interview. 2 people stood out in my mind from these interviews. The first is Edward C. Nixon, who was the brother of President Richard M. Nixon. He was a geologist with a master's degree. He said, "Well, I tried to work in geology, I didn't find anything, I couldn't, so I moved out and now I'm a personnel guy." He was the head of personnel at Belcom. Geology, I suppose, trains you for all kinds of things, and here I am, I'm doing fine. I still remember geology. I read some books here and there, but it's all gone. Then the other guy that stood out in my recollections was a geologist from Germany. His name is Bruno E. Sables. He said, "Well, this is a lousy job, it's a paper shuffling job. We get these reports from the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, geologists. None of the NASA people like to look at all these reports, so all our job is just to summarize these damned reports and give it to them. We know that nobody reads them anyway, so it's a paper shuffling job." I said okay. When I went to work, I was right next to him after I accepted the job. My office was right next to Bruno Sables. I told him, "When you get these reports from the geologists, give them to me. I'll summarize them for you." He said great. He liked the whole notion, so I did. He gets these reports, supposed to summarize them. He gives them to me, I summarize them in 1 paragraph and give it to him. That went on for a long while very nicely. Then there was another geologist who worked for NASA by the name of Donald A. Beatty. He reminded me of the story himself not long ago. He said, "When you came, you were green as anything. You came to my office, shook hands, introduced yourself, and you said you were going to be working for Belcom. You looked at this huge stack of filing tables in my office, you said. What are these? The moon. That's the lunar pictures. There are too many of them. He opened the drawers and showed me the pictures, and I began to look at them with interest. He said, listen, if you want to take them, go ahead and take them, I don't want them anymore. I said sure, and took all the pictures. This was the beginning of the pictures that I began to look at. I was fascinated, and I thought I'd begin to study these, and began to do that for myself. Not long after, there was a meeting of the geologists in one of the NASA centers in Virginia, Langley Research Center, Hampton, Virginia. Don Beatty was going. He called me up, he said, I'm going to Langley Research Center for a geology meeting. Want to come along? I said absolutely, so we hopped in the car and he drove his Mustang. He was quite happy with it. We went down to Langley. I forget the town. The hotel was called Strawberry Banks. Norfolk, Virginia, I think. We went to these meetings inside the Langley Center. The geologists began to report on their findings. These were geologists mostly from the U.S. Geological Survey. Some of them were seconded to NASA. Some of them were completely supported by NASA in Flagstaff, Arizona. There was a branch of astrogeology in Flagstaff, Arizona, with a small component of the same branch in Menlo Park, California. These were the U.S. Geological Survey geologists that were supported by money from NASA to work on the geology of the moon. Many of these people would stand up and talk about Copernicus crater and various hills, features one by one by one by one. This was the first meeting. Then the second meeting went on. The same thing happened. I began to realize that I really needed to get more familiar with all these pictures so I could communicate with my buddy geologists. I went to NASA headquarters, Washington, D.C., at the library and asked them, where are the lunar photographs? They told me in such and such room. I went to that room, and there were piles of lunar orbiter pictures just like the ones with Don Beatty. Totally disorganized, and just shoved all over. I went to the librarian and said, these need organization. Can we have some tables? We'll fix them.